Mark, what is the real objective? My view, I want to get yours on it, and I had this thing going on early, masks, vax, guns, right? Get people to comply, take a mask, put a mask on that doesn't do anything, then take a vax that's unproven, right? So you start complying. And then, of course, the third leg of the stool is take your guns away, right? Because if you put on a mask and then if you'll take a vax, then it would be easy to just give up your guns. What is the Democrats, the liberals, the communists, what is their real objective with this disarming us?
Well, I think it varies a little bit from anti-gunner to anti-gunner, but at the end of the day, it's about control, isn't it? If you think about it, the Founding Fathers created a constitution with a series of checks and balances and protections, all of which were designed for a single purpose, to protect your and my fundamental individual freedoms and rights. And one of the critical components, of course, in addition to things like federalism, checks and balances, enumerated powers of Congress, and Supreme Court, is also the right to keep and bear arms. At the end of the day, I think the left in America really would like to govern over all Americans from 5 cities. They really view the Hunger Games as a documentary in many respects and not as like a fictional piece of work. So I think that they really do want D.C., Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York City to make all the decisions for the rest of us, and that includes, it's kind of like how London controls the United Kingdom. That's the world they want to live in. But and in order to get to that world, they really have to take away a lot of these checks and balances that are found in the Constitution, and one of them is the right to keep and bear arms. Because remember, if you get rid of all these checks and balances, if you get rid of all these protections, if you get rid of the right to bear arms, the right to free speech, all these other things that protect our fundamental freedoms, guess what you get? You get total control and the ability to bully people and make them do what you want. And of course, that is the ultimate goal. I think they don't really like the U.S. Constitution. That's why they always denigrate, for example, our founding fathers. They try to attack the Constitution. And yet, of course, they can never point to a Constitution or any system of government that has protected freedom and given rise to greater wealth and prosperity, John, anywhere in the history of the world, more than the U.S. Constitution. And yet they still denigrate it because, to me, it's about power and control at the end of the day, is my guess.
So, Mark, people are seeing the IRS being armed with submachine guns. They're seeing these agencies stockpiling weaponry at an alarming rate. You hire these 87,000 IRS agents with the Democrats want, and you arm them. That's a bigger army than the 3 armed services combined with weapons. What I mean, for the average American to see this, do you really, are they saying, yeah, we want to give up our guns because some whack job's out there, shooting someone up, and yet we're going to give guns to every possible government agencies in massive numbers? I mean, how does that square?
Yeah, it doesn't. But the good news is, John, Americans are really catching on and they're seeing this. I mean, it used to be whenever there was a terrible mass shooting, there was an immediate reaction that we want more gun control. That was the historical kind of knee-jerk reaction. But over time, Americans realized that what all this proves is this, that the anti-gun movement in America does not actually dislike guns. And this is a critical point, and I think my book about disarmament in Ukraine proves the point, that the guns are not bad in the minds of a lot of people on the left. What they don't like is you and I and American citizens having guns. They're perfectly fine with the government having guns, the government having a monopoly on firearms, but they don't want the citizens to have that. That's like they're fine sending the guns to the Ukrainian people, but they don't want the American people to have them. So yeah, I think that Americans now have really caught on that indeed firearms save lives, because obviously if they did not save lives, why do we protect our president, our vice president, our Hollywood elites, our royal elites, meaning like the recent coronation was surrounded by guns over in non-gun UK, right? So people have really caught on to the value of firearms because they've seen these quote-unquote political elites surround themselves with guns. And keep in mind that in light of these mass shootings, the real lesson of the mass shootings is that the government will not be there to protect you, so you better protect yourself. You better be your own first responder, because the reality is the so-called first responders, just by nature of the beast, they're not going to get there in time to save your life. They're going to show up in time to draw a chalk line around your body maybe and investigate the crime, but they're not going to save your life. And I think Americans have finally picked up on the need for these firearms ahead of time, and that's why we're seeing the massive growth in the number of people that own firearms in all walks of life. And they do see things like the IRS agents getting armed to the teeth with firearms, and they say, why do they need the firearms? Well, if they need firearms, maybe I do too.